Hunger in Ohio has been above the national average for much of this year, according to the U.S. Census Bureau's Household Pulse survey on food scarcity. A year after the end of Emergency Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP benefits, some food banks in Ohio are overwhelmed. And with food prices still high and gas averaging over $3 a gallon, traffic at food banks is steady and increasing. This week I talked about that with the executive director of the Ohio Association of Foodbanks. So let's start with demand. We have emergency SNAP benefits ended in March. Inflation is slowing. Prices are still pretty high. They haven't been going down. Unemployment is down, but a living wage in Ohio is not what the minimum wage is. And that minimum wage proposal to raise it won't be on this fall's ballot. Housing costs are up. So what's been demand like that you've seen in the food banks?
You're absolutely right. Pressure is mounting, and those SNAP emergency allotments ended March of 2023. So we've had a little over a year without those SNAP emergency allotments that were helping put a really significant and helpful Band-Aid on what is now our everyday experience in our food pantry lines. Before COVID-19 happened, we were serving about 2 million food pantry visitors a quarter. And that was after a very prolonged recovery coming out of the Great Recession. So we had finally gotten to a sort of new normal. And now we're serving 3.6 to 3.8 million food pantry visitors every quarter. We had, before a year ago, never hit more than 3 million food pantry visits in a quarter, and now we're approaching 4 million in a quarter.
And there are some food banks and food pantries that are having to expand and get bigger to reach all the demand, right?
That's right. We've really become a safety net to the safety net. The benefits that are available to families with low and moderate incomes aren't keeping up with the costs of basic needs. As you said, household expenses like housing, rent and mortgage, utilities, childcare, of course, as we all know, is a crisis facing many families. Ohio is also an aging state, so we have a lot of older adults who were already going to find themselves with inadequate retirement incomes to support their basic needs. And now with the pressure they're facing on their expenses, where else did they have to turn? So they're coming to us really much more frequently.
That brings me to a question about people in need who would be accessing food banks. Can they access them? I mean, are food banks in the areas where they need to be so people can get to them easy? There's a stigma surrounding food bank usage in some areas, I imagine. Are food banks really reaching the people who really need them?
Oh, it's a big, good, meaty question that I love to talk about because, you know, really before the pandemic struck, we were on the cusp of coming out of recovery where we were getting to think big about how we could not only prevent hunger today, but prevent it upstream, right? Address really root causes of hunger and poverty and income and economic insecurity. And then here we were with a major crisis. And so we're trying to keep our eyes on both feeding the need today and thinking about the future. How do we stay resilient and accessible? I think one of the really positive things that did come out of the pandemic is that people became much more aware of our services, and it did release some of that stigma that might have previously existed for a lot of families. I mean, we're still serving many new families that have not had to come for us before or have not in many years. And just to give you a sense of the scope of our network, we've got 12 regional food banks that are large multi-county warehouses that not only provide access to millions of pounds of food every year, but also an extensive array of other services. And they're doing so in partnership with about 3,600 different local hunger relief agencies across all 88 counties. So of course we're not perfect. We would always like to be there for every person, but we're really committed to trying to drive equitable access to food across our communities. And it's going to get tougher and tougher here because we've had a lot of one-time help, both with our partners at the state of Ohio, as well as from our partners at the USDA. And right now, without some urgent, some urgent change and some urgent policy decisions, especially with our federal partners right now, as they continue to debate a farm bill, we're left without enough food.
And you've made some changes to food banks and food pantries. For instance, some food pantries look more like markets where people can walk through and select what they want. You've also enabled the use of online ordering and curbside pickup for some families. Have you gotten any, while that's tried to bring in people who may not be able to access food banks otherwise, has that also brought in criticism from people saying, hey, why are they allowed to do this? Why is this happening?
I think that everyone recognized that largely we are all a paycheck or two away from being in the same position. And I think that's still in our very recent memory coming out of the pandemic that impacted so many of us and our loved ones. And that's true for every one of us. Almost a majority of Americans can't pull enough out of their savings to respond to a $400 emergency. So I think there's a lot of if by grace, there go I attitude amongst our consumers and our neighbors. And no, I think that largely Ohioans are really generous and caring, and they believe that everyone deserves access to food to meet their basic needs. We can't think about the future and how we thrive as communities and as a state if we don't make sure that people are nourished and fed.
Speaking of access to food in the summertime, which is when kids who normally would have school breakfast, free school lunch, or reduced price don't get that option. The summer food program, it's in operation now, and there's been some changes to it.
Yeah, we're really excited. Honestly, the state of Ohio and some of our elected officials have really set the precedent for this and been working for some exciting federal changes for a long time. This goes back a couple of farm bills ago. There were marker bills that Senator Brown and then Senator Portman advanced in several farm bills that would have encouraged modernization of our summer food service programs and the programs that are designed to provide out-of-school time meals to kids in need. So finally, now we have new federal policy, permanent in statute, and one of those exciting changes is a permanent summer EBT program. So you might be familiar with the pandemic EBT program that was in place as kids were at home and unable to learn in traditional school buildings. So this mirrors the success of that program. It gives families an extra $120 per child for the summer to help them go and buy more groceries while their kids are out of school. And in addition to that, there's also expanded permanent access to non-congregate feeding. So our issue with the traditional summer food service program has always been that it only reaches about 1 in 10 eligible children. And often children in rural communities aren't as easily able to get access to those meals. So this program is designed to help rural providers in those areas, say, let families come and pick up a week's worth of meals or deliver a week's worth of meals. So they only have to make one touch with that family each week during the summer instead of that child needing to somehow get 20 miles each way in a really rural area to get a meal.
You referenced this earlier, the Farm Bill. The 2024 Federal Farm Bill seems to be stalled in Congress right now. You have concerns about it both for families and for the food banks that you run.
Absolutely. We need really strong bipartisan Farm Bill priorities included in this legislation. We've been waiting on a Farm Bill for well, it feels like a few years now. We have a continuing resolution in place right now, which is holding us in a status quo position. And, we really lack a lot of certainty about what we'll be able to do to continue to respond. I just want to reiterate that this is going to be a prolonged recovery. We've only begun, and we know that from our experience coming out of the Great Recession. I think that there's years ahead of us to make sure that people have their basic needs met and can think about kids going to school and actually focusing and learning and achieving, workers being productive out in our local economies, and older adults being able to age in place. So that means we need a strong SNAP program. The food banks are not built to respond to giant gaps in our federal nutrition safety net, and unfortunately those gaps are growing rapidly. So we need strong SNAP benefits. We need people to be able to spend those benefits in their local grocery stores. We would always prefer that than them needing to come to our lines, because that means that they're spending in their local economies and generating revenue, creating jobs, maintaining jobs, and being part of their community's food access system.
The bill that passed, that is now currently stalled, it passed, I believe, a House committee, did not include funding for the local food purchase assistance program, which would directly affect food banks' ability to access food to make available.
Yes, we've had so there's a couple of federal programs that provide access to foods for food banks to help respond to need. One is the Emergency Food Assistance Program, or TFAP. That's essentially a market clearing program. So when we see products that are available beyond what the traditional market can consume, then the USDA is able to secure those products so they don't go to waste and direct them to the food banks that can get them to people in need. And in addition to that program, which again is funded either at current levels, or the current proposal in the appropriations debates would actually reduce funding for the food bank storage and distribution. The funds that go into putting fuel in the trucks, making sure the coolers stay on. And so that's functionally a cut for us because all of the food costs more right now. All of the inputs, all of the labor costs, et cetera, cost more. And yes, the local food purchase assistance program, LFPA, we call it Ohio CAN here in Ohio. We couldn't begin to tell you how proud we are of this program. The USDA launched the program a couple of years ago, and in just a couple of years, we've launched a network of over 170 local growers, farmers, and producers and suppliers who they're new and emerging. They might be BIPOC, women-owned, family farms, veteran-owned, and they're excited about being able to stay in farming. It's a really difficult job to be in, and we need our local farmers to have resilient food supply chains so that we have a food secure state and country. And right now, it doesn't have permanent funding authorization. So we definitely have our eyes on, we need a permanent solution, a permanent fix, or else we'll be coming up on a growing season just in 6 months or so when farmers start planning for their crops and what those outlooks look like and those forecasts. They need certainty, and that's a big priority for us.
There is a September 30th deadline for the Farm Bill to pass. There are certain programs that would end and other things that go into, because the Farm Bill is a huge, sweeping document. What if there's no resolution by September 30th? It's an election year. That's a possibility.
That's right. What's most likely to happen is that they'll come together and pass a status quo continuing resolution. As we've seen in many of at the same time, we'll have government shutdown threats that might be approaching because we have appropriations debates that had to kick off for fiscal year 25 as soon as we finally got through fiscal year 24 debates. So there's going to be a lot of tenuous discussions across the aisle and across the chambers in Congress around how to advance whatever a short-term temporary funding model looks like for our farm and nutrition programs, as well as our other federal budget priorities.
I want to ask you about a couple of other things because you're part of the Ohio Benefits Bank that helps people in need access all sorts of different programs. For instance, Medicaid. There was a new process. People who were getting Medicaid benefits during the pandemic had to requalify for those benefits, and that has resulted in 459,000 fewer people on the Medicaid rolls now than compared to a year ago. What's been the effect of that on the populations that you serve?
Great question. Well, we don't have population-specific data yet to really know with certainty what's going on in the Medicaid caseload. I have to say that we are encouraged in some ways because we know we've seen that about 183,000 new Ohioans enrolled in affordable healthcare plans through the federal marketplace in 2024 compared to 2023. So that's encouraging. It may be that at least that portion of the Medicaid caseload was in fact no longer eligible for Medicaid because they had attained increased employment, increased wages, and now they've been connected with affordable coverage from the federal marketplace. But with that said, of course, we're most concerned about vulnerable people with low incomes that maybe in a transient situation may not have known how to push the right paperwork and might have fallen through the cracks. And really, we never want to see anyone go uninsured because we all pay the price of that, whether you're insured through employer-provided coverage, marketplace coverage, Medicaid coverage, Medicare, you name it. We're all ultimately paying for the same costs together, shopping for and utilizing healthcare. So we really need to make sure that people have access to coverage so they can get their health needs treated when they need them.
It's been acknowledged by elected officials, business leaders, and advocates in Ohio that there is a crisis in both affordable childcare and affordable housing. Is there any hope that there's going to be relief in either of those areas, from the legislature, from the federal government, anywhere?
I can't pretend to be an expert, but we are in coalition with a broad-based health and human services coalition called Advocates for Ohio's Future. So I'm in regular conversation with partners working in those areas. And of course, we know that every Ohioan is a whole person who cares about putting food on the table, but also about going to work and having their child cared for in a safe environment, about affording the roof over their head and the utility bills. So we're always in conversation, and every kind of policy solution that needs to be advanced ultimately impacts food security as well. I'm encouraged, of course, that there's a recognition that this is a broad and deeply embedded issue that we need to address. And I also think we have to have our eyes open about there's always going to be unintended consequences of any good or bad policy decision. You know, when we talk about tax policy, if we're going to cut income taxes for some folks, and then local governments need to fund those services instead with increased property taxes. Now we're looking at greater pressure on older adults that can't afford those property taxes. If we provide relief, which they deserve, then how do we fund those local services that people need access to? So, I don't pretend that it's not complex and challenging. I think if we together, along with partners in the General Assembly, center people and their needs to stay in their homes and be able to thrive in their communities, that we can figure this out.
And that is it for this week. For my colleagues at the State House News Bureau of Ohio Public Radio and Television, thanks for watching. Please check out our website at statenews.org or find us online by searching State of Ohio Show. You can also hear more from the Bureau on our podcast, The Ohio State House Scoop. Look for it every Monday morning wherever you get your podcasts. And please join us again next time for The State of Ohio.
Support for the State House News Bureau comes from Medical Mutual, dedicated to the health and well-being of Ohioans, offering health insurance plans as well as dental, vision, and wellness programs to help people achieve their goals and remain healthy. More at medmutual.com. The law offices of Porter Wright Morris and Arthur LLP. Porter Wright is dedicated to bringing inspired legal outcomes to the Ohio business community. More at porterwright.com. Porter Wright, inspired every day. The Ohio Education Association, representing 120,000 educators who are united in their mission to create the excellent public schools every child deserves. More at ohea.org.